Today, I'm going to show you how to go from prototype all the way to code in the browser to create this. Before we begin, this video sponsor is bookmark.com, which is a free website builder that uses artificial intelligence to create websites right in front of your eyes. The entire process is less than 2 minutes and it only consists of answering 7 simple questions. And if you need to sell stuff, you can create an online store very easily. It's really cool. I recommend it, so check out bookmark.com today. Hey everyone, how's it going? Gary Simon of Coursetro. So today we have more of a lengthy tutorial, and I'm really excited about it because I don't really go from prototype and then show you how to realize it in actual HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but that's exactly what we're doing today. So there's a modern trend called, it's sometimes referred to as a mega menu, where you click on a menu item, particularly especially on desktop or tablet versions, and you click on it and there's a whole overlay that just fills the entire screen with some sort of elaborate menu. So I'm going to show you how to do a really basic version of that. And first we're going to step into Adobe XD and we're going to design exactly what you see here. And I'm going to talk about the considerations that you have in order to try to get this realistically mocked up so that you can show a potential client before you actually go ahead and waste time implementing and then they tell you they don't want that. And so if we hit play, we're going to have a real good representation of what this thing should look like and act like when it's in the browser. So if we click on this hamburger menu, there you go. Awesome stuff. All right, so I'm going to show you exactly how to work with that. And then we're going to step into our code editor using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I'm using vanilla JavaScript, by the way, because I want this to be framework or library agnostic, so I don't leave anybody out. It's all just a matter of translating and understanding the concepts behind class binding and click event binding, which are two very simple concepts in any of those 3 major frameworks or libraries. All right, and so we could see here, this is the live version in the browser. If we click it, we can see it's pretty much exactly the same with exception to this part. When those animations came in real fast, I was just screwing around near the end of the tutorial just to show you some different animation ideas. But initially, you'll see because I just got finished recording this tutorial, you'll see that they do slide in and up real smoothly like they did in the actual prototype mockup. All right, so I've been talking way too much. So today, our question is, do you use any tools or plugins for CSS animations? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you subscribe here and let's get started. All right, so we're going to start here in Adobe XD, the new project. This is obviously what starts up when you load it up. We're going to choose Web 1920 for the default artboard size. And we're not going to bother with making this responsive. That's kind of outside of the scope of this tutorial. It would just add extra work. But of course, once we get to the CSS portion, you can just use media queries to make it responsive. All right, so what we're gonna do first is just give a very extremely simple interface here. So I'm gonna take the type tool. I'm just gonna type in something like my site, just for a fictional name. I'm gonna use Montserrat as always. We're gonna change this to bold, and we'll make it black. All right, then we'll come up and increase the size, give it some good white space from the side here, and then over here on the right hand side I'll position this in a second, but I want it to be roughly the same size. We're gonna hold shift and make a 45-degree angle up. You know what, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm doing the close button. I first want to do the hamburger icon, so I'm just gonna hold shift and drag out a line right around there, maybe 4 for the size, and we'll make the border black. We'll take this, Control D, hold shift, drag it down right around there, hit Control D as well to duplicate it again, and then use the alignment just to make sure they're all lined up appropriately. And then align all 3 of them in the center, group them, hit Control B, or not Control B, sorry. I'm thinking about a different application. We're going to change the name of this group. We'll just call this menu. All right, so now we'll take that and we'll position it over here to the right. Very simple. All right, and then finally, I'm just going to have one H1 element in HTML just for something there to see. And I'm just going to say this is fancy. All right, not really, but you know. And then one final thing, just because the designer in me, I don't want it to look just like this. We'll use the CSS property of, or the selector of before, and we'll use the content pre or the content empty property to get this border up here. So I'll just use this fill, something like that. This is fancy. Whatever. All right, so it'll end up looking something like pretty close to this in the browser. All right, so now at this point, we have to ask ourselves, okay, how do we want this massive or this mega menu to overlay? Well, first, before we get to that point, let's just change. I want to make sure that a few things are changed up. I don't like using the default names most of the time, so I'm just going to put in H1 border here, and that's all good. Okay, so now we're going to duplicate this artboard, but first change the name to home. All right, Control D to duplicate it. This is going to be, we're just going to call this overlay. And now we're going to design the actual overlay in its final state after it is animated in. So we'll take the rectangle tool, just put it on top of everything. No border, make it black. Now, just temporarily, I'm going to just drag it down, and we're going to make a close button. So to do that, I'll just take this right around here. I'm just holding shift to get to that 45-degree angle. Size 4, we'll make it consistent. For now, we're just going to make it black, but we'll change it to white in a second. We're going to duplicate it, and then we are going to hold shift and then just drag the one anchor point over to the left, and then just position it right there as such. All right, so that looks pretty good. We'll hit Control G. We'll call this close. And we will also, it is to the top, so that will work. I'll just call this overlay. That's this big black overlay down here. And we will make it white, and we'll drag this up. Oh, before I do that, I want to make sure it's pretty much in the same location. Awesome. All right. So then we're just going to have 4 columns for 4 different layout or menu items. So the first one will be home. And we can't see it because it's black, so we're going to make it white and drastically reduce the size. I say to around 59 looks good. Underneath home, we're going to take the type tool, left-click, drag out an area of right around there, just for some filler text like "come on home already" or something silly. And then we'll make this, let's see here, regular, and we'll make it kind of gray just to contrast a little bit more so with the main home label area. All right, something like that. So once you have that, we're just going to duplicate that, put this right around here, duplicate that, put that around here, and then duplicate that as well. All right, so just real quickly, I'll change these up. About us, services, and because I'm lazy, I'm not going to change the other text underneath it. You get the point. Okay. So that's the final appearance of what the menu will look like after it has transitioned in. And so what we can do now is we need to work with the layers a little bit. So first, these should be groups. All right, so group here, and selecting both of these and a group there. So we have 4 groups, and we're going to just name this to menu 1, menu 2, menu 3, and you guessed it, menu 4. You're so smart. All right, and so we have our close. Let's take a look at all these items here. I like the names; they're all good. And then finally, I'm going to make this so that we have to really think ahead. I mean, you can always adjust things later on if you screw up, but it helps to think ahead in terms of how you want the menu to really come in terms of the individual elements. Do you want, for instance, do you want it to be like this? You could just do this. If we go here to the prototype section, we drag this over here, put transition none, hit play, and click it. I'm gonna make sure this is the actually, yeah, it's a tap transition. Sorry about that. So now if we click this, I mean, do you just want it to be like that, or do you want to have animation come in? So in this context, what I want first is for this black container to kind of just slide out over everything first. And when it's doing that though, I don't want these menu items to be visible. I want it to slide in first, and then we'll have each one of these fade up. And this X button will also fade in as well. And we can apply CSS animation properties to control exactly how each of these 4 or 5 different elements will animate in. So in terms of Adobe XD and how to get that type of animation, visible in the prototype where a potential client or whoever can see it, then we have to set this up a certain way. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to take these 4 items, or these 5 items really, and we're going to give them an opacity of 0. Now, we're going from this artboard to this artboard essentially. And in a side note, you would normally want to set this up as an overlay in the prototype section. But if you do want to have multi-step animations, I found that you can't do that with a normal overlay. That's just like a side note. If you don't know what I'm talking about, do an Adobe XD overlay and you'll kind of see what I mean. So we're going from this to this essentially, and then we have to have another artboard that will fade these in. So we're going to be working with 3 artboards. All right. So for this first one, let's go ahead and if we get out the layers again real quick, I want to make sure everything is in a group that's a part of this. So this menu here, if I select everything, we don't need the My Site logo or the menu right here as a part of this group. Just these things right here. So with them all selected, we'll hit Control G and we'll just call this overlay menu. Okay. So now we have to duplicate this. So we have 2 copies, but we have to drag this over and make sure it's inside of home. So now it's inside of the home artboard. You see we have 2 artboards, home and overlay, but both of them now should have a copy with this particular item here. So we have home, we have overlay menu, and also overlay, we have overlay menu as well. They need to have the same names in order for these animations to work properly. All right, so now I'm going to position this down here, by the way, so that I could take this and I'm going to take the X position. You could just move it like this. You can see how it affects your X position, but I want it to be exact, so I'm just going to type in 1920. It's going to hang off to the side, which sounds a little strange, but you'll see, how this works. Now we have to ask yourself, how do we want this to animate, and how are we going to control the animation of this thing right here going into this artboard when we're in CSS? Well, I thought we could probably just use, because I want it to slide over, instead of moving this whole thing over, we can just use the transform scale function to scale it on the x-axis from 0 all the way to 100% of the browser. So what I'll do is just double click into here just to get access to this overlay black container and just put it in basically to 0 right there. All right, so now let's go ahead to the prototype section and see if this actually works. So we'll take this menu. It is going here, but we have to make sure that we're choosing auto-animate for the action type. And also a duration, we'll say 1 second. All right, so we can ease in out. You can experiment with the different type of easing options. And let's go ahead and hit play and see if this works. There we go. Perfect. So now for the final setup for this, we have to duplicate this overlay artboard. And we'll just call this overlay all. And now remember, by default, all of these elements are still here. If I hover over these, you'll see that they're showing up, but they're just, they're all hidden. So let's bring them back here. Oops. I'll just double click this and then hold shift, left click once, left click once, left click once. These are going to have an opacity of 100%, as well as our little icon up here. All right, so this is the final result. Now, if we want these to animate into this position right here, we have to take each one of these and move them down. So if I select all, move it down maybe just a little bit. I know it's kind of hard to see because we're not really looking at it. And then hold shift to just deselect this one. Move this one down a little bit more. Move this one down a little bit more. It would probably help to be able to see these and probably temporarily just bring them back. In fact, let me do that real quick because I want to. Well, looking at this, it does look like they're pretty accurate in terms of distance. This one could probably be down a little bit more. And there we go. So let's give this a shot. The final thing is to go to Prototypes tab. We'll drag this over here to the Overlay All. And the trigger is going to be a time trigger with a 0-second delay. So once this artboard is into view, it will automatically shift over and auto-animate into the Overlay All option. And so you could do this indefinitely. So you could have crazy long animation sequences. All right. So this duration, do we want it to be, do we want to take 1 second for all these? Well, let's just give it a try and see. So hit it. There we go. I say that's pretty smooth. Now, as a final thing, you could reverse this animation and make them all fall out, and you can completely do that. It would require replicating this artboard and sending this over there. But just to make things simple, I'm just going to double click into there to select the X, and we'll just choose tap trigger. We're not going to auto animate. We're just going to do transition, and the animation, we're just going to hit none and hit play. So now we can try it out. And there we go. That's exactly what it's pretty much going to look like when we get to the HTML and CSS section, which is right now. All right, so what we want to do is in the console, I'm just going to use it real quickly to create a folder. So we're going to do make directory. We're going to call this mega menu, cd mega menu after it's created, and code period to launch the Visual Studio Code, my code editor. It's coming off screen. Here it is. And let's get started. So index.html we're going to create, and I'm going to hit exclamation point for some boilerplate for HTML. We'll call this mega menu. We're going to type in right here, link enter, and we'll say it's going to go to a folder called CSS, main.css for the CSS file that we reference. All right, and let's create that real quickly. So we have CSS and a main.sass file. We're going to use Sass. There's a Sass extension that will enable this for you. So when it detects that you created a Sass file, you'll see watch Sass down here, and just click on it. And now it's watching your Sass file and compiling it down to a CSS file right here. So we work within the Sass file, not the CSS file. Just some basic stuff for you. And let's close that out. All right. We're also going to need 2 images, SVG graphics from Adobe XD. So the first one's going to be this little icon right here. And the next one's going to be the X icon right down there. So the name is menu. All right. So that's the name it's going to be exported as. So we can right click over here, and we can actually right click on the name, export selected, SVG. So we're going to go into mega, mega menu. We're going to create an images folder, and we'll select folder, hit export. Awesome. And then we'll select this one, export selected, and export. It'll remember your previous location, and we're done with that. All right, so now let's go ahead and do the HTML. It's very simple. So yeah, that's a good size right here. I think you can still see what I'm saying, typing here. So we're gonna have a nav element with an ID of overlay, and we're giving it an ID because we need to reference this in a little bit in JavaScript. And so this nav is actually, the nav element will be the black overlay itself that comes in. So we'll be specifying that background property onto this nav element. Right here, we're also going to have a, actually before we get to the nav, I'll leave this right here. Before we get to the nav, let's do the everything else that shows up before the menu is clicked. So we'll do a header. The header element, of course, just has two elements. So we'll have a logo, and this goes nowhere, and the logo is my site. We're going to give this an ID, a class of logos. We'll style it. And then we also have an image source, and this is images / menu.svg. I already forgot the names. Class is menu - button, and we'll give it an ID of open menu, and we'll reference that in JavaScript with a click event listener. All right, and then we're going to have just a simple section element for our h1 element, which is this is fancy. And that's all the HTML is for our little example. So now if I take this, right click, open with live server, this is another extension you can install, we'll now see our big hamburger menu. So we have to style that, obviously, to get that fixed up. So now let's go ahead, and I'm going to hit Control B here, get rid of this welcome tab, and we're going to split our code up here so that our main is on this side and our index HTML is on this side. All right, so just some real quick HTML to get us, or CSS to get us started. We're going to import the font right here. So this is the Montserrat font from Google Web Fonts. And then we're going to reference body and HTML real quick, and we're going to say font family is that Montserrat. And we're also going to say the margin is 0 on these elements, and any links is text decoration none. That gets rid of the underline. So next we have up the header element right here. And don't worry, we're going to get to this nav. I did say we were done with the HTML, but not quite. We're going to get to that after we style all this stuff first. So we have our header right here. We're going to say padding 2em. That's going to push away the logo and the hamburger icon menu from the edges. And let's adjust the logo real quick. We're going to make it black. Hyperlink is making it blue currently, and also a font weight of bold. And then also, we'll take a look at the result in a second. Menu button, we got to fix that because it's so large. The width will be just like 18 pixels. We're going to float it to the right, and cursor pointer so that it changes when you hover over it. So now, there we go. My site and our menu, just like in our XD template. Now let's just real quickly reference our section. So our section element is just, we're going to put padding like 4em, just a ton here on the desktop version. The h1 element, we're going to say font size is 4em. So we're making it big. Margin on the top and bottom is going to be 1em, and on the right and left will be auto to center it. And then also width, we'll say like 70%. And let's check that out. Good stuff. I like it. And then also we will add in, we'll put and before, the before selector, content. It's just a blank content. Border top, it's going to be 5 pixels solid. And RGB, let me just show you what I did initially. I said light gray. And let me put display block. If we check this out, actually light gray is not even bad. But if you wanted to adjust it here within Visual Studio Code to something else, you just hover over the value, and then now you can just change, to wherever you want. It changed it to an RGB function there just to control it. And there we go. All right, so that is it for this part. All right, so now let's make this thing work. And initially, we're not going to be hiding it initially. We're just going to let it overlay everything so that we can style it as we need to. So now let's go back to the HTML for this nav element. And again, it's very simple. We're just going to copy, actually, this part, because this is basically almost the same thing. This is for the X icon. So I think we called that, what was it, close? Yep. And this is going to be a class of close button and then close menu for the ID. Finally, an unordered list with a list item with an A element going nowhere. This first one is home. And then I'm going to use a span element for the little text underneath that we designed. So hurry get back to the choppa. There we go. Good old Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I'm just going to paste that. So we have a total of 4. Quickly adjust these: about us, services, and contact. Awesome. So now if we view it, it's going to look like garbage. Oh, okay. Yeah, nothing was wrong. That was just because there's a big white X right here, and that's why I was confused initially. Yeah, don't worry. We're going to fix this all up as we need to. So now let's revert back to the CSS. So first we have our nav element that we need to focus on, the nav ID of overlay. So we're going to put in nav. We're going to say position, and this has a bunch of properties, and I'll try to describe some of the ones that won't be so obvious. So position absolute is so that it can really just sit on top of all the other existing elements. We wouldn't be able to do that if it was display block or something like that. Background, of course, we know what that does. We're going to make it not black, but blocked, but black. We're also going to have a width here. Now we're going to use a calc function for this because, well, before I do the width, you'll understand why we're going to make calc functions. We're going to put padding of 2em, and the purpose of that will be to push away the elements like the X logo, for not logo, but the X icon to close out from the edges of this element right here. So padding of 2em all around. So then we're going to put in a width. We want this width of this container to be 100% of the viewport, right? That's how we designed it. But if we do that, it's going to give us scroll bars because it adds in 100% plus 4em on the right and left. So you don't want that. And also on the top and bottom. So you do calc, and then we put in 100% minus 4em. Very simple. You can also, with Sass, you can do this with variables to make things a little bit more dynamic, but I'm just kind of going quick here. Height, we're going to say calc is 100 viewport heights and minus 4em as well, the same. And I find that viewport heights work better than for height than percentages. Next, we're going to have, let's see, next we're going to leave it exactly as in. We're going to put display none initially, but we don't want to do that because I want to see the result in the browser. So now if we do this, we have this massive overlay. So let's go fix that horrendously ugly icon. So the close button class is a width of 18 pixels, the same as the hamburger. We're going to float right, that's just the same. Cursor pointer, just the same. And eventually we will put opacity 0 on that. And there it is. So let's keep on going. We can see our text right here. It looks horrendous. So let's fix that. So we have our unordered list. Oops, why am I doing that? We're not in HTML. Unordered list right here. List style type none. This gets rid of the bullet points that we can't see currently because it's black on black, but it's just good to get rid of them anyhow. Margin on this, we're going to have at the top, we're going to push it down by 10%, and then we're going to auto the right and left, but 0 on the bottom. I don't want 10% on the bottom, so that's why I'm putting all 4 of these values like that. Also, our padding is going to be 0. There is some default padding added on by the browser for unordered lists. We're going to display grid this because we have 4 columns, and I like the grid way of arranging columns and such. So we're going to put grid template columns. All right, and this is going to be, let's see, repeat 4 times 25%. So we're creating just equal, or you could just do auto as well, really. Equal 4 column parts for our navigation. And then a width of about 80%. So let's see what's happening so far. There they are, right there. Now you may be wondering to yourself, how exactly did I know to use 10% and all that stuff? Well, I didn't initially. I was looking at the browser as I was designing, and I decided to add these in to try to structure things and make the layout a little bit better and more consistent with the prototype that we designed in Adobe XD. Whew, okay, I'm talking a lot. So now let's add in the A elements that are within our list items. We're going to make them white. Font weight is bold, and font size is 1.4 em. So there we go. We're getting close. Also, we have our span elements. The color is going to be gray. The display block this. Span elements don't have any type of block elements, so that we're going to do that. Font size 0.75 em, and margin top is 20 pixels. There we go. And then finally, we will have a reference to the list item of opacity 0, but we're not going to do that just yet. So this is it for now. This is what it's going to look like when it's done animating in. Obviously nothing works. You can't see the other design. It's behind everything right here. So let's make this start to work, and we're going to do a little bit of JavaScript now at this point. So back in our HTML file, we're going to come out at the bottom and type script, and we're just going to do this inline just to make things simple. You could obviously link a different JS file, but we're not going to do that. And so what we're going to do is first create a couple variables to give us access to easily reference the overlay button, or the overlay ID, and the close menu button. So we're going to do var overlay equals document, and we have a bunch of methods that we can use. One is get element by ID. You can see it's the first one selected here. All right, and so which ID do we want to get? Well, we come up here, nav ID of overlay. This is the one that we want to get. So we're going to say overlay. I'm going to hit Shift Alt and the down arrow key to duplicate that. In this one, we're going to name the close menu. Get element by ID. We call this close menu. All right, so nothing's happening now. We just defined some variables. Now we're going to say document.get element by ID. The open menu, we're going to say add event. This is all pure vanilla JavaScript stuff. Obviously, if you're using something like React, Angular, or Vue, there's going to be a different way to go about this. And this deals with class binding. That's all we're doing. Click events, click binding, and class binding. This is the vanilla JavaScript way of doing it. So add event listener. What type do we want? Well, we want a click event, right? So when somebody clicks on one of these elements here, or the open menu element rather, then we're going to have something happen. So we declare a function, and we open it up like this. So, we also have to put a comma there. So then we'll say, what do we want to happen when the open menu ID is clicked? The open menu is right here. This is the menu, the hamburger menu that shows up over here on the right that we can't currently see. Well, we want to open this overlay element up, right? Well, in other words, we want to attach a CSS class that will apply animations to it. So what we'll do is just type in overlay, because we defined it as a variable here. We're going to say .class list, and this is something that exists on these DOM elements here, .add. And we're going to add one called show, sorry, I was like burping for a second, show menu, and that's it. So then, while we're here, actually, I don't want to get too ahead of myself. We'll just save it right here. And in order to make this work, we have to make some adjustments in the CSS. So the first one is we're going to have display none on our nav element. This means it goes away and we're back here. Then we have to create this class that we're adding called show menu. So if we come down here, we're going to create this class, and it's going to be show menu. This is the one that we're attaching when somebody clicks on that button. We're going to say display block because we had display none initially. So let's save this. There we go. Now this doesn't work yet, so let's make the close button work. All right, so for that to work, we're simply going to copy all of this. All right, so this is going to be close menu. And we're going to do an overlay class dot remove show menu. Save it. Look at that. Now it's kind of boring. So let's make the actual animation work. We're done with the JavaScript. We will never have to touch that again in this tutorial. All right, might as well, I guess, at this point, just hit X here, and that way we can just look solely at all the CSS that we've written so far. All right, so for show menu, we have to ask ourselves, how do we want this animation to be applied? Well, let's go here, and we're going to type an animation property. So we're going to set an animation with an animation name. We can name it whatever we want. We'll just call this slide-menu. All right, and for a duration of, I'd say 1 second. That's what we did in the prototype. We'll make it ease in, and we're going to say forwards because we don't want it to loop. It just plays the animation, and that's that. All right, so then we're going to go ahead and create our keyframes, and we reference slide menu. So we're defining the type of animation occurring here from, and we're going to say transform scale X 0 to transform scale X on the X axis to 1. Now this isn't going to work just yet because we have to apply a couple properties onto the nav element itself right here. And that is transform scale X 0. So we're setting it to 0 by default. And then also, let me just save this and you'll see how the animation plays out. It will be a little bit funky looking, but then we'll fix it. So if we click this, it comes from the center. So that means we need to change the transform origin. Transform origin right. So it's going to come from the right and scale out. So click this. Look at that. Now, it does look a little silly when everything is by default just being squashed and like coming out. I don't like that, so let's fix that. First, we have to set opacity 0 on 2 different elements, I believe. And the first one's going to be the close button. So by default, it's hidden. And the next one is going to be on our list items, which contain both the title and that little span element. So if we save this now, watch what happens. It's blank. That's what we want initially, and then we want the things to fade in and show up. So at that point, or at this point, we simply, in here, we say inside of show menu, the show menu class, the close button, we're going to say animation. Sorry about that. Show-X, that's the name of the animation I'm giving it. 0.3 seconds. You know what? Let's make it 1 second. And then also, we want it to only start animating after this menu has slidden in, and it takes 1 second for that animation to come in. So we're going to give this a delay. The next property that we could put in the animation property, or the next value rather, is the delay. So, how long should it take before this animation executes? We'll say 1 second once this panel comes fully into view. And then we'll say forwards, and then we'll create the animation X. And this is very simple. I'm not even going to bother typing it out. It's just the same thing of here. Instead of transform, we're putting opacity 0 to 1. So let's try that. Watch up here. There it goes. You can make it slide up too and do whatever you want. That's what we're going to do with these elements here. So just a little bit more. Bear with me. I know we've been on this for quite a while now. So we'll say, let's see here. Instead of giving them specific IDs to control when each one animates in, I'm just going to use a different way of doing it. So we're going to say li nth of type selector. And so the first one, this will be the home link. So it's just basically saying the first li element that you find. So we'll say animation, menu, item, and we'll just say anim for that. We'll make these about 0.6 seconds forwards. And then also we want to put in the delay of 1 second and then ease in out. You could play around with the easing as well, the values. All right. So now let's create menu item anim. So at keyframes, that is menu item anim. All right. We will, let's see here. We'll just do a real simple from and to. And for the initial one, and the reason I don't have this one on my reference monitor, so I'm going to do this on the fly. We're going to say translate Y on the Y-axis because we want it to move up vertically. And we'll say 30%. All right. And then we'll take this. We'll go 2. Also, opacity will be 0. Opacity will be 1. 2, 0. At its starting point, essentially. All right, so let's save that. There it goes. 30% wasn't entirely noticeable. So let's do more like 60. So let's refresh. All right, a little bit better. Okay, so now what we can do is simply take this, change this to 2, 3, and 4. And the delay can be like 1.2, 1.4, and 1.6. All right, and let's save it. Look at that. Exciting stuff. So if you wanted to, you could, for instance, make it so that when you click X, it will actually take these back out and, you know, kind of reverse the effect, but I'm not going to do that. That can be your own little project that you can do, but it's still not difficult. And you can just figure out how to do that in relation to JavaScript and CSS classes. Just to show you another real quick tip, in case you're interested, if you want more unique sort of animations, we can use bouncejs.com, all right? And so what we can do is they give you presets. So let's Slinky. Okay, that's silly. We would not want our menu items to do that. What's Swoosh? Okay, Swoosh looks cool, except I don't want it to come in from the left like it's doing. So what we can do is change the two properties that are making this thing work. So what we'll do is change this from -300 here to the y-axis, and we'll make it +300. And then also scale. There's something funky happening on the scale. We'll take this from 1 and then make this one 15. Now it's working how we want it to. Right way though, I understand one thing. It looks cool when you're scaling something like this, like a rectangle, but when you're doing it to text, it looks bad. It distorts the text, I just realized. So what we can do is we don't want this. It'll just be the element, the type elements itself. Obviously, there's many different CSS tools you can use, of course, but this is just one. So if we choose Export CSS, we don't need the prefixes. We can just copy this stuff, only the values, and we'll go back to our project here. And right down here, we'll paste it, and we have to put opacity 1 on the 0% and opacity 1 on the 100%. So now let's save this and give it a shot. We're at localhost 5500. I accidentally closed that out, so let me just hit go live again real quick. And let's try it out. Cool stuff. All right, so let's look at that again. Really fun stuff. So you can obviously have a ton of ability to do all sorts of cool things once you understand how to use just basic JavaScript and CSS properties. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that. We covered a lot, but I assume for a lot of people watching, it's going to be tremendously helpful to see, you know, not just one aspect of being a designer, but seeing both aspects come together when you're going from prototype and mock-up to code implementation. And those are both two very handy skills to have, obviously, in this day and age. All right, so make sure you answer today's question, which is, do you use any tools or plugins for CSS animations? There's a bunch of them out there. There's browser extensions and really cool things. So let me know, subscribe for sure, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.